Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks where kindred souls gather together to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as the February Room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for composite development fly rods and accessories. 40 years of Kiwi ingenuity and graphite technology, now available at cd-fishing.us or your local CD USA dealer. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And remember to go fishing. Here's your host, the Carnops, and this is the February Room.
Our fishing buddies have seen us at our best, fabricating some widget in the remote reaches of a river canyon to solve a problem, and at our worst, for instance, draining the beer cooler dry and leaving the food out for the raccoons. We share a dialogue with our fishing buddies that nobody else can really understand, not our wives, co-workers, or non-fishing friends. Today, I have a chance to catch up with an old fishing buddy of mine and rehash some of our exploits. I've known him for nearly 20 years and still can't spell his last name. Jess Tuchscherer, welcome to the February Room.
Oh, man, Judd, so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
The last time we hung out and fished together, I believe, was on the South Fork of the Snake, and I had to borrow your dog to keep from getting hypothermia at night. And did you loan me a sleeping bag too?
Actually, I think it was one of those intimate moments between us where around 4:30 a.m. or 5 a.m. when it was just the gloaming, just first light, you were pacing outside my tent. And I remember waking up and, I was sleeping, had my dog snuggled with me. And I just remember you saying, "I'm freezing to death. Can I just get in there with you?" And I'm pretty sure it was you, me, and my chocolate lab, Eddie, in the same sleeping bag at about 5:15 in the morning.
Yeah, that was a prime example of being of a experienced or so-called experienced river guy being completely ill prepared. We launched on an August trip, and it was 100 degrees in Montana, and man, all the trips I've done in August, it's been just sweltering hot throughout the West, and that was not the case in your neck of the woods. It was frigid at night.
About 40 degrees, 38, and then the dew point, you hit the dew point and everything gets wet.
I brought like a tiny fleece sleeping bag. Yes. And no warm clothes.
I think you direct quote, "I don't want this to get weird, but I'm going to go ahead and snuggle you."
I had to. If there'd have been a dead tauntaun around, you'd have had to throw me in there. I was dying, man.
Oh God, it's pretty amazing. Your pacing is what woke me up. Like I know,
God, it was cold.
Tent. I mean, am I going to have to defend myself?
That dog was sure warm, man. That was what a great little heater. Well, that was one for the books. I know that you fish all the time, and I know you've got a bunch of stories that I haven't heard. Do you have do you have a treasure from the chest you can lay on me?
Oh, sure. I mean, it might be one of those stories where you had to be there to truly appreciate the hilarity of it, but it's probably about 20 years ago, and and I'm fishing with another buddy whom you know well, my buddy Lucas, who he's a guide in Missoula and probably will be for the next 3 decades and has been for the last 2 decades. And so it was got to be about 20 years ago now, and it was a March trip, mid-March, maybe late March, and eagerly, as anybody that knows the hatches around Missoula, just anticipating the squall hatch, and this was in an era where you could go float the Bitterroot on a Saturday and you wouldn't see that many boats, and so, Jeff and I, we decide to float, pretty close to Hamilton, figuring, middle of river might be the best chance to get into some bugs, and we want to stubbornly, fish dry flies. We'd probably had a banner day if we'd have just thrown streamers or, nymphed a turd and a worm or something, because there's probably way more nymphs than there were adult bugs. But we just want to catch fish on dries after a long winter. And so I think the only thing we brought with us was some fried chicken and a case of PBR. And we start floating, and it's a little bit chilly in the morning, so we decide to pull over in an eddy. It's just like, well, let's just drink a beer, eat some chicken, and we'll wait. Maybe get some sun on the water, let the water temperature come up, and maybe that'll stimulate the fish, And so we pull over, eat a couple pieces of chicken, and I'm younger, I'm not thinking, and I just eating a chicken breast. It's just like, what are you doing, man? Leave no trace. And I think I said some naive comment like, well, the crawfish, the crawdads got to eat too, And so we let it warm up, and probably an hour later we peel out of the eddy and we float, and fish throughout the day. And we do manage to pick up some fish on dries, but it was certainly not a banner day. We stubbornly fished them, like I said, and we're probably a quarter mile, a half mile above the takeout. And at this point, several PBRs later, I'm just kind of, I'm over it. I'm not even looking at my bugs anymore. I'm just I'm essentially tight lining, not even recasting. My bugs are down below the boat. I'm turning and I'm talking to Jeff, and all of a sudden I feel a little tick, tick, on my flies. I figure it's just, a trout eating a drowned squallow. And so I pull the trigger. And I'm like, I think I even said something stupid like, let's dance, And I turn and look at Lucas and I'm smiling. I'm like, yeah, finally, getting eat, because we hadn't had any eat in 2 hours, And so, and I did something probably even more dumb, like drop down to side pressure. And I'm like, it doesn't feel very big. And so I'm, hand reeling this fish in and get whatever it is right next to the boat. And what is it? It's the chicken bone, the carcass of the chicken breast that I had eaten 6 hours earlier. Somehow, in all the time that we took to get downriver, where we had eddied out, tied on different flies, stopped to talk, let the dogs swim, this chicken bone had kept pace with us the entire way downstream, about a quarter mile above the takeout. Somehow I caught it on the end of my line. And so effectively I left, trace that.
Let's dance.
Throwing it back in the river. I just threw it in the trash can in the boat. Talk about karma, man. Lucas and I, we were laughing so hard, we had tears coming down our face.
I bet.
Couldn't fish. It was just we're done. Let's go out, go get a beer and a burger and a bar somewhere on the way back to Missoula and call her a day.
Let's dance.
Let's dance. Just kind of how punchy you get after a day of slow fishing, and
sure,
maybe 3 or 4, 6 PBRs, over the course of 8 hours. You're just, you get a little sloppy.
No doubt. Now, there was one March Madness that I think you and I spent the entire tournament on the Bitterroot, and you had a BAC hovering somewhere around 0.2 for the better part of 3 weeks.
Oh my God! Just to be in your 20s again, before you
no doubt.
Well, it was the beauty of it, working seasonally as a guide, and you'd have a lot of your springs off, and so the ability to just float 25 days in a row. I think at one point you turned and looked at me and were like, what day is it? And I looked back at you and I was dead serious, and I was like, March?
That was as close as we could come. Yeah, that was. You remember I had Sirius satellite radio had kind of just come out, and I had that little portable unit that you could pull out, and we'd bring that with us so we could listen to the games.
Oh, I remember fondly. We would listen to the entire NCAA tournament and just fish squallows and namuras on the Bitterroot. all day long, you know.
God, that was awesome.
And that was before I had a mortgage and, you know, a son and a wife and a career. You know,
Right. Speaking of which, you're a school teacher in Jackson.
yes, I am. Yep. Yeah.
In high school or?
Yep, high school. I teach at Jackson Hole High School. I teach English 11, which is world literature, to my juniors, and then I teach college English to my seniors. And so these kids have concurrent enrollment through Central Wyoming College. They earn college credit throughout their senior year, which is great. I used to coach the football team, but after coaching football for about a decade, I missed my fall. You know, I mean, throwing streamers for browns in the fall, you know, chasing elk in the fall. And, you know, it was just too much. So I kind of retired from that, but I still coach soccer in the springtime. And I help train athletes in the weight room after school. So I just,
you do?
Yeah, I help supervise the weight room, work out with the kids, just push them to be, you know, make healthier decisions in their lives, you know, and give them an opportunity to do so.
Awesome. And are you still, I know, over the last couple of years, you've still been doing a little whitewater guiding in the summer. Are you still doing that, or are you done with that now that you got the boy?
I'm still doing it, man. Like, I think this is year 22 of guiding, you know? So, what is nice is that being a professional, being a teacher, I don't have to do it 7 days a week like I did previously. Down here, you know, down in Jackson, it's, you do 5 trips a day, man. You have a 8 a.m., a 10 a.m., a 12:30, a 2:30, and a 4:30. So you and burn. You're doing 40 miles of water in a day, 40 miles of river in a day, 5 trips a day. And I mean, instead of like the small boats that they run in Montana, you know, like your Super Puma or your Moravia Spider, or, you know, maybe you got a 14 or 15 foot air, you're running 18 to 20 foot boats with 5 thwarts, and you're packing 16 people in there and a stern frame, and you're just pushing rubber down the river, man. So,
whoa, it's just Mick Rafting.
It's Mick Rafting at its finest, but it's
awesome.
It's a beautiful river canyon, you know, and, you know, people are there to have fun. So rafting's rafting, you know, like just, and there's big waves. I mean, like those big boats, like during our high water season, those big 18 and 20 footers, I mean, they flip like pretty routinely, you know. And then even as the water drops, some different features come in, you know, like kahuna or double draw, you know, and like you see the underside of quite a few boats down there. So
wow, cool. I whitewater guided before I became a fishing guide in Oregon, and you know, it was the best job for a fisherman because not only are you on the river, but I had the prime times to fish by myself, right? Like I had the morning and the evening every day, and then I'd go run my trips from 10 till 4 or whatever, and yeah, it's like the river never disappoints when you're a whitewater guide, right? The rapids are always there. Yep. It's always beautiful. I mean, yeah, granted you can flip and it's dangerous and it can go south, but you know, where we went, there was definitely that element. But if you played it safe, you could pretty much, minimize the risk of flipping a boat on the Deschutes. And it was just awesome because you didn't have that element of, oh my gosh, the fishing's slow. Right. This dude's getting weird because the fishing's slow and they don't have a skill set to get the fishing part done. That there's not really that element so much in the whitewater guiding that I did.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. It's like, even though we turn and burn down there, you still have the best part of the day to yourself. Like whenever I'm down in the canyon and I know I've got a 5-trip day, I still bring a fly rod with me, and I can sneak away in the morning for 20 minutes, and there's always a pod of fish up eating caddis or PMDs, and go catch 3 or 4 fish and then work my day, or even between trips, and then even when I was younger and I was a kayaker and, liked riverboarding, and just like surfing, like there's like, especially as like a fledgling guide, being on the Alberton Gorge, is where I kind of cut my teeth as a young guide. And I mean, so many different features would come in as the water would rise, with our snow melt and runoff. And then as the water would recede, I mean, between triple bridges and comp hole and church wave, and just there's always something to play in, always something to surf. It was just, you could wake up early and bring a thermos of coffee down to the river and surf for an hour, and then come and work your trips and clean up. And then at the end of the day, transition from coffee to a couple of cold ones, and, go down and surf at night, and it was a pretty special experience being able to do that, throughout, college years and beyond. So, and if you didn't feel like surfing that day, then bring your fly rod down to the river and, just wait for the caddis to stop or start popping, and, kind of that magic hour like that, or as the sun goes down and you have about that half hour, 45 minutes before it's jet black, just throw some caddis out there and let those rainbows on the lower Clark Fork work their magic.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And I'm sure that the clients are probably much more stoked to see a guide show up with 25 years of experience rather than a 21-year-old frat boy who's hungover.
Yeah. You still get some of that down there in the canyon as well, on the Snake River. But, the crew I work for down there is fantastic. I've been guiding with them for 10 years, and I think about a lot of the different crews I've worked for. I think this is the fourth outfitter that I've worked for over my career, and outrun anything anywhere with those guys. The attention to detail that they have, safety, their experience. I mean, it's, they're all, you'll look at some other outfits and they kind of have what you described, some 21, 22-year-old frat boys, or, maybe they wear outfits or like a cow outfit while they're guiding. Like, I look at my crew and it's like, hell yeah, fellas, let's get this done, So, and I think you're right. I think the customers appreciate that, like the confidence we have, but also the respect we have for the river, knowing that, regardless of our experience, the river's in charge, and being keenly aware of that. I think they do appreciate it. So.
Right. And you're surrounded by water there. The fishing possibilities are endless, kind of like they are here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you kind of go into your home waters a little bit? Like, what are some of your, not to give away any spots, but,
yeah, right.
What's kind of the scene around you? What do you like to go do if you got a couple days off? Close to home?
Love to float, but also love to use my legs, if the ambitious sort, if you want to hike a few miles and get off the beaten track, there are beautiful alpine lakes where you can go fish for grayling, and it's almost like the further you hike, if you're willing to go 5, 6, 7, 10 miles, for a day of fishing one way, it's like every step you take is like turning back the clock, because you get back to that old school ability to find that small mountain lake where it's every cast, every other cast, every 5 casts, you're catching cutties and grayling, and that's fun, and especially a lot of people like to recreate up north in the parks. I don't like to do that. I like to go south and east, and I do a lot of fishing in the tributaries, the Wind Rivers, and even further south, and you just don't see anybody because everybody's all geeked out and ready to be in the national parks, when there is so much to explore in the national forests. And in the national forest, as a dog owner, I can bring my chocolate labs and just go get lost, so if you are adventurous and you want to hike, you can certainly do that and fish the tributary that you're walking up, all the way up to the lakes. But then love doing floating. I love to float. Like we float a lot of those high desert rivers, and those tributaries of the winds, and they just have beautiful fish, and you can fish it. It's a lot like fishing in Montana. If you want to nymph it, you can. If you want to streamer fish it, you can. If you want to be a dry fly purist, you are certainly able to do that, and I think one of my favorite floats is kind of high desert hoppers, like especially later in the summer, July, August, if you got a couple of days off, and now that floating with a half rack or a full rack of PBR isn't a priority anymore, get up early, like be up at 2 or 3, be on really early, and be off the river by the time, people are putting on, and fish that nocturnal stonehatch. Like that is super fun. It is the big fish come out to play. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. Montana gets all the glory, but for better or for worse, Wyoming is amazing. I obviously haven't spent near as much time poking around there as you have, but just been starting to make some trips out there and explore a little bit. And yeah, the fishing possibilities are endless. And like you said, you just don't see the people.
You don't, and it, like anything, I mean, this industry, you've just seen this explosion over the years, and I've seen, Montana blow up and Idaho blow up, and Wyoming is starting to blow up, but, it's, I think, a way to, like, I mean, the $1 million question, like, how do you not love it to death, like, especially in this COVID era where everybody's getting outside, like, vary the time you're on the water, like, try to be on the water when people aren't there, like one of the best things we do is there's this particular river up there that a couple of times a summer, maybe once a summer, July, August, we wait for the full moon and we put on right at dark, and we float about this 15-mile stretch that is very friendly that you can do in the dark, and we just throw mouse patterns the entire time. And it is amazing how those river systems at night come alive. I mean, just what you hear next to you and you can't see, and you think it's a huge moose, and so you turn on your headlight and it's actually just a beaver working in, on the edge on the shore, and then what you think is a beaver, you turn on your headlight and it's like, oh dear God, that is a huge moose. That's 10 feet away. But the blowups you get, you might get 3 a night, and in a good night maybe you get 10. But it's
Jeez.
Like big blowups on the mouse patterns are like somebody threw a bowling ball in the river. And chances are you're going to trout set because you're going to geek out because it's been 2 hours of nothing, and all of a sudden, sploosh, and you trout set instead of strip set. But even when you miss it, man, it is super fun. Just your heart's in your throat. Like you're so excited and geeked out on coffee that you feel like you're gonna throw up. But you miss the fish, but it was pretty special when it happened.
Oh man, that sounds amazing. That's I've dinked around a little bit with the mouse thing around here and never really had anything too spectacular happen. Had a couple of eats, caught a big old squapper that I thought was a brown till we got it to the boat. But I need to come do that one with you.
Absolutely, man. I mean, at my age now, God, I wish I was younger. Because I could do that and then transition right into like a hopper float afterwards and not worry about sleeping. Now, like,
yeah,
stay up all night. Like, I'm just destroyed for like 3 days afterwards.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And you don't even touch a beer, and you're just
right
destroyed due to lack of sleep. So.
Yeah, that's a tough one, but worth doing. You could still muster the energy to go. I could go do it once.
Yeah.
Like clockwork, my phone will ding in late March and it'll be from you. And it's a picture of an enormous Lahontan cutthroat. You've kind of made you have a little bit of a new springtime tradition going on. Can you tell me about your adventures in Nevada a little bit?
Yeah. I was kind of coerced into going to Pyramid Lake by a couple of my buddies, and I was reluctant at first, all the research that I had done is, belly boats and chronomid fishing, with, 15-foot leaders under a bobber. And, we're going to go for 4 days and stare at a bobber for, 120 hours, kind of begrudgingly went this first time, about 5 years ago. And we did do that. You're fishing the rocks, these lava rocks. And the first time I went, I stepped where I thought there was rock and just ripped the butt out of my waders and was frustrated. But the very first time I went, I caught a decent Lahontan, and the fishing was okay. I think in a 3-day fishing trip, caught a handful of Lahotans, but like any fishery, I started going back annually, with the same crew, and started tying different patterns, different chronomids, experimenting with colors. And it's an interesting area. It is reminiscent of Alaska. It can be some combat fishing where you're sitting there on a beach and you look left and there's 30 anglers spread out to your left, and you look right and there's 15 anglers spread out to your right. And it's frustrating in that regard. But the challenge is getting these fish that see so many flies throughout the year like hundreds upon, like not hundreds, thousands upon thousands of flies. How can you tie something that's unique that is going to stick out from the rest? And on my second trip and my third trip, on subsequent trips, we really started to figure out the fishery. And I think it was on my third trip, it was kind of just slow fishing, and I started to get a little frustrated. And I was like, you know what? We're freaking trout, man. And so I walked to my truck, tied on like some articulated, streamer pattern, and because everybody's throwing their boobies and their leech patterns and their chronomids, I just started fishing them.
Damn booby anglers.
Right? So I just started fishing like I'd fish, trout in Montana and Idaho and Wyoming. And guess what started happening? I just started roping fish, man, because everybody is throwing what the fly shops prescribe, like this pattern, that pattern.
Nobody's hucking big streamers.
And if you just go and huck meat, man, like it was great, super fun. And what I realized, instead of having to be, throwing these chronomids underneath, 15 feet of mono, you can just go tie up something that they just don't see often and go streamer fish and fish it like you would if you were 16 years old, fishing trout for the first time, and super fun, and it's I reluctantly kind of fell in love with it, because I thought it was going to be just a bobber nymph fest. And it turned out that you can just go and huck meat, man, and do well. And we actually caught it last year when we were there. We caught it on a heater. I mean, it was the best I've ever seen it fish. I watched a couple of guys that weren't in my group. They were a couple of ladders down from me, and they were landing fish for their friends, but made the mistake of reeling their lines in, their flies in, but leaving them in the water. And the fish were on the bite so much that they would just eat right next to the ladder, and your $1,000 fly rod and reel gone. So that's how much they're on the bite, So, but it's a lake that can, because you can catch a fish of a lifetime on any given cast, it keeps you on your toes, but it can completely humble you. You can go over there for 3 straight days and just get blanked. So it can be on or off, but it's fun. I mean, it's kind of opened my eyes to what can be out there, and I mean, it's certainly not as remote as Strobel Lake. It's, right there outside of Reno, but it's fun. It can challenge any angler. And if you want to go catch a 30-inch fish that weighs 20 pounds, they're in that lake. So,
and it can weather the bejesus out of you, right?
Oh God, man! Like after 3 or 4 days on that lake in a row, I mean, and they are marathon days. You're up at 4, you're right there at 5 at sunup, and you fish all the way to sundown. I mean, with that lake and that wind and that brackish water, I mean, it's salt water in that lake. It ages you. I mean, you show up like
you look like you come home looking like an old sailor.
You do, man, an old salt. Too many days at sea.
I love those trips. When you come home and your wife just kind of like glares at you for a minute and like, oh my God. What is that thing?
What happened to my husband? Who are you? All your muscles are split. Your lips are chapped. You're sunburned. You've got dry skin just poking out of every area that was exposed to the elements. And it takes you a solid 2 to 3 weeks to heal from 3 to 5 days on that lake. It's got its hooks in me. We're going back this year. The same crew that's been going for the last 5 years. We're going.
Well, if you ever have an empty seat in the rig, let me know, man. I'd love to come down there and do that. Are you fishing off a ladder yourself?
So there's all sorts of ladders, that you can use. There's some companies down there that build those custom ladders that actually they wheel out. It's on a tripod system, and they have a platform with like a swivel chair on it, and that's what my buddies get, and me. I mean, me, Judd, probably
stilts.
Better.
I'm envisioning a set of stilts.
I'm on a pogo stick out there. No, I've just got a 6-foot paint ladder. I'm not going to spend $400 on something I'm going to use for 3 days a year. If that is your cup of tea, do it. No judgment. But I've got a 6-foot painting ladder that I just set out there, and I mean, and the thing is, you could wait it, you could go out waist deep, but that water is cold, man. And in spite of your best layering, and then once the wind whips up, those waves are can be 4 or 5 feet tall. I watched my buddy Jens get just devoured by a wave. I mean, he tried to jump it, took his legs out. There goes Jens. um, yeah, but just to get out of the water and be above the surface, just to conserve body temperature, it's huge. I mean, and that and your back cast. I mean, you're double hauling streamers all day, and instead of slapping the water behind you because you're waist deep, to be 5-6 feet above the water, it helps a lot, to get out to the drop offs where the fish are.
So can you see, is there a sight fishing element, or is it largely blind casting, or a mix of both, or
a little bit of both? I mean, if you're nymphing, you're blind casting and you're waiting for that school to come through, and what's pretty amazing is that you can tell when you're getting eaten, because either one, you can see the fish, those Lahotans. I mean, they've got I don't know what they're doing, and it's been the topic of discussion between my buddies and I. Like, they will come up and breach. They come up, and I don't know if they're just slurping air for their air bladders, or they're, but you'll see them breach, and you'll see them roll on the surface, and they come through in schools. And so either you see them and know to be ready and try and time your cast accordingly if you're throwing streamers, or you'll know because you watch 15 anglers down a hookup, then a minute later 10 anglers down a hookup, then a moment later 5 anglers down a hookup. So for me, instead of just blind casting, when you kind of become keenly aware of these hints that those trout give you, just try and time it accordingly. Like, instead of speed up your cast and like get as many in the water as you can because the school's coming, try and time it perfectly. And if you can kind of get that rhythm down, like you can kind of predict when a strike's going to happen, or when the fish are coming through, visually as well as looking at the other anglers.
Cool, man. It sounds super interesting. I'd love to go check it out one of these years.
Judd, you are always welcome. Like, we'd love to have you. It's just me and 2 buddies that have been going down, so there's plenty of room. And either we sleep in the backs of their trucks on the beach, because it's all, you're on the reservation there, and the beaches are open. You can camp on them. Or, there's some small rooms that you can get at one of these local, it's not even a resort. It's just kind of like fishing cabins you can get next to the river, or next to the lake.
Awesome. When you guided out here, you worked for a company that was also really involved in whitewater rescue.
Yeah.
And were you? I don't recall. Were you? I seem to remember that you were involved in some of those whitewater rescue efforts in real life, right?
Yeah. Like,
can you tell us one of those stories?
Yeah, I worked for Montana River Guides at the time. Mike Johnston was the owner, and he was certified through Rescue 3 International to teach swiftwater rescue. And he and Cody Harris went on to form the Whitewater Rescue Institute, which is still based out of Missoula in the Bitterroot Valley. I mean, they train people from around the world and travel around the world training people in swiftwater rescue. And I used to help with those classes, working as a guide. And I wasn't certified as a swiftwater instructor, but given my river experience, and I was a lead guide with them, I would help with the training. So we do a lot of training on the Blackfoot, certifying firefighters. Like, we'd have members of the Coast Guard would come in and do some of their continuing education. Like, we even began to, with our outreach, like, train Navy SEALs, to diversify what they could do. And obviously trained guides from Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, any chance we could do. And on one particular case, we were on a trip on the gorge, and it was a higher water trip. I think the water was probably 25,000. And it was, I think, a 4-boat move. There was 4 rafts. I was the lead raft, and coming behind the rafts were several river boarders who happened to be Navy SEALs that were just doing some training and then riverboarding along with the trip. And on this particular day, this was a long time ago, probably more than 20 years, a log had come and lodged below tumbleweed, below that pinch right there. And it stretched probably halfway across the river. So there was a significant obstacle, a strainer that had lodged between a couple of the biggest rapids, between Split Rock and Tumbleweed. And as a lead boat coming through, I could tell I was riding a surge. Like the river like just fluctuates so much during our high water flows there. Like I've been eddied out running safety for trips where I'm on a riverboard and I'm sitting in one of those micro eddies, and they're kind of like changing room eddies along Tumbleweed on river left as you're coming down, and they're like these chimneys that have just been carved out over millennia of high water. And you can be sitting there with your hand on the rock and you're neck deep in the water waiting for the boats to go by. And then all of a sudden you're waist deep or knee deep, because the surge has gone through and the water's dropped. And so that's how much the water pulses through there. And I could tell that I was riding a pulse. So I come through, and there's kind of a sneak line on the left during high water because there's a big reaction wave coming off the wall at Tumbleweed on the bottom right at those levels. And I come through, and as it opens up into the eddies below Tumbleweed, I see what I couldn't see before, which was the strainer that is halfway across the river, and it was covered by water, but as the surge dropped, it exposed the log. And
Gotcha.
I think there's a few choice words because all the water pushes to the left right there. And reset my angle quick, and dig in, all forward, dig, and managed to hit the strainer with the stern of my boat, but was able to spin my boat off the strainer. And I immediately got on my whistle, started blowing, on my whistle, like just long blasts, like, and pointing positive, pointing away from the strainer, pointing away so the boats behind me knew that, like, the hazard was there. And the other three boats managed to miss it. And truthfully, I think only one of the other three boats saw it because the water surged again, the river surged, and it covered that strainer back up. Our riverboarders came through next, and Johnston was the lead riverboarder, a couple of people behind him, and then we had a sweetboarder who was another guide, and he actually got caught on the strainer and somehow managed, and he was caught there long enough that Johnston eddied out below the strainer, had enough time to walk upstream and was yelling at him, "Do you need a rope? Do you need a rope? Do you need a rope?" But was able to identify the strainer soon enough that he aggressively swam at it and was able to get high enough on it that he shimmied his way over. Unfortunately,
Johnston.
Or
the guy that was stuck.
The other guy that was stuck somehow.
Oh, okay. He was able to swim over the top of it.
Yeah. After being stuck, he was able to shimmy his way over. And we were all pretty shook. I mean, that was enough for us to cancel our trips. And unfortunately, the rescue scenario ended up the next day, a young woman got bounced out.
That's right. Yep.
Got bounced out above and swam all the way through Tumbleweed, all the way into that strainer, and unfortunately drowned. And we were there for part of that body recovery, and it was a very profound lesson that I learned early in my guiding career, like wood, water, the consequences. I mean, it's something I remember so vividly to this day, and unfortunately, if you spend enough time on the water, there's been, you see, that scenario repeat itself in different aspects, I mean, the river's a very powerful thing, and you see not only whitewater accidents, but fishing accidents, people not wearing life jackets while they're in drift boats and cold water immersion. So there's been a lot of rescues over the years.
Well, anglers as a group generally tend to be somewhat ill prepared.
Yeah.
They often don't wear life jackets, rarely wear life jackets, I should say, myself included. I mean, I'll put one on if I'm running Rock Creek in the springtime or, during high water on the upper Bitterroot or something. But, as generally as a group, and we had Jason Schroeder on from Zootown Surfers a while ago, and he kind of reiterated this, he's like, I'm kind of amazed at the level of nonchalance that I see amongst the fly fishing crowd on whitewater rivers.
Yeah, no, me too. And I'm guilty as charged, and of all people, who has been on the river in a whitewater capacity for so many years. I mean, I fish as many days as I recreate whitewater. I don't wear a life jacket when I'm fishing. It's July, it's 80 degrees. I'm fishing hoppers, but I mean, should my buddy be paying more attention when he's on the sticks to looking at my bugs than he is to, route finding? We hit a rock, I fall out, I hit my head. I'm not wearing a life jacket. I'm going to drown,
Yeah.
And so I'm guilty as charged as well. I mean, and it seems super ironic given my background in river safety, swiftwater rescue, and running river trips for as long as I have. So wear your life jacket.
That's the takeaway. Well, awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for the time, and it was great to catch up with you. I know you're busy with family now, out on the West Coast. So we'll let you get back after it. But text me the dates when you guys are thinking about that pyramid trick. I'd love to swing down and experience that.
We'd love to have you, man.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com, where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.